everything going?
It is going great. Good to see you.
You too. Thank you for asking me to be on your show.
Well, Glenn, space and UFOs. I mean, this thing is going vertical now. Everything is starting to come out in waves, and concerning UFOs and or how they say unidentified aerial phenomena. I mean, just a matter of semantics. They're always changing. I don't know why. Um, but talking about moon bases, whether or not they exist or what's going on up there, what are they hiding, is so relevant to the conversation. I had to have you on the program.
Well, I appreciate it, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions because there is a catastrophic um, veil of misinformation being perpetrated about this subject. And unfortunately, the greater part of it comes and is generated from the UFO community. The government has ceased to a certain extent their misinformation program already since the 70s because they found out the cadre of UFO people did a very good job of messing it all up themselves. They didn't have to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so you hear a lot of information as you mentioned, but not all that information is applicable, nor is it well thought through. I give you an example. You mentioned, that it was said that by one particular noteworthy individual that the space visitors are hiding
Mm-hmm.
from us so that they don't cause panic. And nothing could be further from the truth. If you look in the historical records, they've been with us for 4,000 years. If that's hiding, boy, they're not doing a very good job of it.
No.
And so what happens is the common ploy that is used is to take somebody with a recognizable name because that's what people want. They want to have somebody that is, shall we say, noteworthy, tell them what to think. That way they don't have to think for themselves. So they have this individual who also works for the intelligence community for decades, and we all know the information that comes through the intelligence community is highly censored, and they have to sign documents that state that they cannot discuss this subject and it is ultra top secret, and there are severe penalties, jail time, massive fines, all of this that is outside the regular court system.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you get some of these people. There's one gentleman that has worked for the DOD, according to him, overseas for over 20 years as a debunker. Now, all of a sudden, he is not a debunker anymore. He's out there feeding you information, a whole lot of it, which is a bunch of bull. And so it is a subject that needs to be addressed, and that's what I'm addressing now in my last book, my latest book that I sent you the cover of,
Mm-hmm.
that I hope to have done in about six months.
Okay, and then once that book is published, then you'll have that ought to be on Amazon.
What happens is the book that you see there is my late father's book from 1969.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that's the book there that my last book here that's coming out.
Okay.
And it will come out. It depends on what the publisher does. If the publisher, many times I make the books available through abe.com, which is a Canadian company. eBay, you'll find me on. Amazon, you'll find me on. So it all depends on and the publishers and what they decide to do and how they decide to distribute it, or whether they leave that up to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned about how that you said until the UFO industry or people, however you want to call them as a group, screwed things up. Kind of remind me of when I think a few years ago, Bob Bigelow from Bigelow Aerospace. You're probably aware of that. I think didn't he offered like a couple $1 million for the three major ufology groups if they could get get together and then produce something or work together, and they couldn't. So he took his money back because they just would not work together.
No, they don't want to. And I give you an example. When they did the congressional, well, actually, it wasn't even Congress. The disclosure hearings, it was a bunch of people that were retired from their field
With Stephen
that
Greer.
took up, yeah, and people who put that together, like Dr. Greer and other people. They showed a bunch of UFO photos that they had been collected. And one of the premier photos they showed was George Adamski's photo, in which they did not give credit to the author. They did not credit everybody else. They said so and so took this picture here and here and there, but not George. And that is because the UFO community tries desperately to ostracize George
Mm-hmm.
because, first of all, there are no pictures like his. And quickly to mention, that is Earth sunrise on the moon, and what you can see there is as the Earth comes up, you can see the reflectivity of the Earth light on the lunar atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the reason that I included that, you can see that it bounces off of that. And a lot of the misnomers, especially this ridiculous accusation that we never went to the moon, is all a bunch of horsepucky. Because when you look at the tens of thousands of microfiche in catalogs, of which only a fraction that we had access to in the 1970s before this even became vogue, you could clearly see that that we were orbiting the moon, that we left material on the surface, and we have telescopic photos from the 200-inch Hale Observatory, Mount Palomar, of the equipment that's left on the moon from the Apollo series. And so what has happened is people have magnified their, well, what's the best way to put it? Ignorance on the conditions on the moon. So they said, well, look, when they planted the flag, it was waving, so it must have been in a studio. Absolutely not. There is a light lunar atmosphere, and it has been recorded for decades.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
this is interesting. I heard you say that with Art Bell that there is an atmosphere, and really, I'm sure a lot of people, of course, would dispute that. But wouldn't that validate why that flag was going back and forth? Because there's actually
absolutely,
well,
and
there
they
you go.
can't dispute it because it's fact. When they opened the lunar hatch, they had 2.5 psi. So that's pounds per square inch. And as you well know, with a pressurized hull, you can't open a hatch unless the outside pressure and the inside pressure are the same. And then they showed some of the lunar pictures that I sent you show clouds and mists moving along the lunar surface.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sustain clouds and mist without a compatible temperature
Mm-hmm.
and
Hey,
also the atmosphere to support it. It is as clear as day.
hey, Glenn, I do have some pictures here ready. What's the name of the picture with the clouds? Do you know?
There's two of them, in fact.
Okay.
There's one on the first orbit, and
First
then
orbit.
as the second orbit comes around, that whole area has
Mm-hmm.
moved
What's
to
the
the
picture?
north of the
Yeah.
picture. I'm trying to find
Okay.
out here,
Okay, that's fine. Sure.
trying to look and see, and hopefully I don't mess this up. Um, mm, let's see here. Now, the ones I sent you. Alrighty. View. Which icons? Okay. It is there are two photos. I think a 10-9 2009 and a 10-9 2009 111 Charlie. I believe that's it may be a different one because this is a different file, but it's still the same photo.
Hmm.
So if you look at the photos, keep going. There's one of them. There's the second one of it.
Oh, here,
Go
let me.
back to the first one.
Okay, let me get out of the picture here. Get you out. Okay, let's go back to the first one. Stand by. Right here.
Here you go. Now, if you look at NASA's 1966 chronology of lunar observations, It goes back 200 years, and it lists clouds, mists, colored lights, moving objects, so on and so forth. And if you look at this one on this orbit, you'll see that if you look at the crater, most of the crater is obscured. You cannot see the northern lip of it at all. Now go to the second photo on the next orbit, and you can see the entire crater, and the whole mist has moved up to the north of that crater.
I see that. Yeah, it definitely has moved. It moved north.
That's right. And this is only one of the many, many photos that we put in, my father put in the first book in 1981. We discovered alien bases on the moon, and then I upgraded it by simply adding just 2 additional chapters.
Glenn Steckling, is that H2O based clouds, or is it some kind of acid cloud like you'd find on Saturn?
No, it's an H2O based cloud because we know the moon has water. In 1971, if you look it up, and I have the release, the Apollo instrumentation measured 7 to 14 hours of water geysers spraying out of the lunar surface. This is 1971. And now we go 40 years later, and then they say, oh, well, gee, looks like we found water on the moon. And then we tried to deny it until China and India sent their probes there, or the Japanese, pardon me, and they confirmed it. So what happens is you have H2O that is beneath the surface, and they say that there's enough underground water that if it would be surface, it would cover the entire surface for 50 feet. So you have underground water, you have atmospheric pressure, you also have what's called a space wind. And that is a slow movement of space and the celestial body at the same time against each other as they move. So you have these 3 factors right away that deal with the flag. The next is you look at the lunar rover, and as it drives across the surface of the moon, you see the dust behind the tires, like you would in the desert when you're driving your dune buggy, floating behind the tire and drifting down to the surface of the moon. You got to have atmospheric pressure and gravity to draw that down. Otherwise, it would just keep floating away.
That kind of reminds me of the movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis, and the female sergeant said to Bear, Bear, what would happen if I kicked you in the nuts? He goes, I'd fly away.
Yeah.
he goes,
there you go.
Yeah, you would fly away, but it'd also be very painful. So we're going to talk about that. But so now you're shocked the audience, which is great. So we got geysers, we got clouds, we got atmosphere. Sounds like you're developing a case for a civilization to exist there, Glenn.
You have gravity as well.
And gravity. Now, what's the
we have mathematically proven the gravity on the front side of the moon to be 64% that of Earth. So in other words, when astronaut Collins jumped in his full space pack, young it was, astronaut young, he could only jump 20 centimeters. And when you think about that, you got people jumping on the basketball courts here higher than that.
Wow.
Then when he hits the golf ball goes 20 meters. Under 1/6 gravity. That should be a drive about a mile and a half down the road.
Hey, clear.
So what happens is very simple. Okay. Von Braun and NASA calculated that the equidistance points between the Earth and the Moon gravitational-wise was at 44,000 miles, not 23,000 miles. If you use a 1/6 Newtonian formula, it would be at 23,000 miles, but it's not. It's at 44. So when you do the math, the mathematical equation, which I have in the book as well, and I showed it step by step so everybody could follow it out themselves, it shows that there is 64% of gravity in the front side of the moon. Wow. And that is after the Earth pull has pulled it and elongated it. On the backside of the moon in the craters, it's even stronger. Gravity,
elongation there,
water, atmosphere, you keep adding the equations up, and you start to get a situation that we have not educated the people about concerning the conditions on the moon.
Sounds like a planetary Viagra pole there. But let me ask you something. I heard you say in a previous interview, and I saw a question pop up in our live chat. People watching the show are sending in questions right now, Glenn. So
Yeah.
I'll disperse them in, sprinkle them in. But you said that the Earth rang like a bell, and of course I've never heard that one, but I have heard that the Moon rang like a bell. Do both planetoids ring like a bell? And is
Yes.
that why are they hollow?
No, has nothing to do with being hollow. We found out that with each atomic underground test, it set up a vibratory shock wave, which caused this frequency that could be like a bell. I mean, I don't know if they, there's so many different frequencies of bells depending on which bell and which country you're ringing, but it gives off a vibratory repercussion like a bell.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the frequencies of that energy rebounding through the tectonic plates and the subterrestrial geophysics, and it rings like a bell. And so our Earth does that, and so does the Moon. The downside to this is that the Japanese laboratories have measured that with every atomic test, not only does the Earth ring like a bell, but it also slightly slows down its orbit.
Mm.
And the dangerous part of this is that we are like idiots sitting in a life raft with a penknife sticking holes in it to see which one of us sink it first. When we slow down the balance between centrifugal and centrifugal force with the Earth spinning, we can get to the point where the planet comes apart because it no longer maintains that balance between spinning and oscillation and rotation. And so it is incredibly foolish
Okay.
what we do.
All right, let's get to a couple questions coming in for you from Billy Strasser out of our live chat. It says, Glenn, why are all moon craters circular? Why don't any of or many have like a ditch or a canyon from angled hits? They all seem to be direct hits, which is unlikely.
Well, first of all, when you take a really close look at the moon, you'll see that a lot of the craters are jagged. You have double-lipped craters. You have a wide assortment, so they're not
Mm-hmm.
all perfect in circumference and in shape. Some of those things you do have that come in an angle, and you do see a skipping process because the accelerated factor between the approaching meteor or meteorite versus the motion of the moon sets it up so they can't avoid it. So you
So
do get.
you're saying there are indirect hits
That's
that
correct. There's
that would
indirect
leave a
hits, and
like
if
a
you look
path.
at it, if you look at close enough at the pictures, we have catalogs of 15 by 17 Hasselblad, which is a very high quality camera and film that Apollo used, and I have them in the vault, in which you
Mhm.
see close-ups of the moon, and you can study that. And then on some of the studies, you see there are symbols like an S carved in the bottom of the craters. There are uh, what looks like uh, conic or cone-shaped structures, and of course, there's the one sighting that was from several years ago that looks like a giant Van de Graaff generator, which is a large ball suspended on a tube with two appendages hanging down, and that
What's hanging down?
a couple of appendages, flanges. So in other words, when you look at an electrical device has pieces to it where the electricity jumps from side to side. Very much when you look at a plasma coil
Mm-hmm.
and you look inside there and you see the electricity jumping in an uneven, unorthodox way around from one place to the next. Van de Graaff generator works very much the same,
Mm-hmm.
Tesla principle.
Okay. All right. Let's get this question. ICXC asks us, Glenn, is the recent hype about Mars happening because that's where the elites are hoping to escape after they destroy the Earth's atmosphere?
Well, first of all, anybody who wants to go to Mars because they think it's a nicer place than Earth should have their head examined, because Mars has only underground water.
Mm-hmm.
It is very arid environment. I mean, if you compare the two planets simply by photograph, which one would you pick? I'd pick this one. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that there is a giant psychological push for, let's say, other reasons to push us mentality wise to go to Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, in my own personal opinion, we are consumed with overpopulation. That is our most dangerous situation,
Mm-hmm.
overpopulation on this planet. It fuels more consumption,
Mm-hmm.
it fuels more destruction of habitat, it creates more waste, and it continues to accelerate to a tune of 83 million people more born every year than pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going on about 12, 13 years, you got another trillion people.
Mm. Would you volunteer to start the depopulation process?
I think that the depopulation process doesn't have to be as severe as that connotation is. Depopulation process is simply a matter of slowing down irresponsible uh, population. In other words, we we continue to populate at certain speeds and locations due to religion, because the religion is teaching us that we must go out and be fruitful and we must go out and do this. And so, consequently, in order to have God's and the religious grace, you must go out and populate more people. But we're not living at a time where there's only a billion people on the planet
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at billions of people on the planet.
Mm.
So we need to be responsible with
Mm-hmm.
with our population.
Uh,
Why is it that we need to have 6 and 8 children? Because
mm,
traditionally we once did that so they could work on the farm and help our parents in order
mm-hmm.
to stay sane themselves. We don't live in those times anymore.
Oh, okay. All right. Billy, come back with another question. Where are the telescopic pictures? Do you have telescope? I don't know. Do you have there additional pictures that are out there? Or?
Yeah, some of them are in the bank that I sent you, some telescopic
Okay.
pictures
All
of
right.
the moon.
Okay. We'll get to those. Here's a question from Uezo Foster. It says, Glenn, how did the astronauts avoid the effects of the Van Allen radiation belt?
Well, first of all, this misnomer came out about, let's see, in 2014. Somebody decides in this whole UFO setup that they need to have another controversy to stir the pot, to keep people interested, to keep paying $400 to go to these conferences, and so on and so forth. The Van Allen radiation belt is nothing.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me now? Glenn, we got some sort of lockup here. Hang on. Can you hear me now? Hello, Glenn. May have to call you back here. Looks like the pictures froze. That'd be a Skype issue here. Let me call you back. All right, let's give Glenn a call back here. As when you deal with Skype, you do deal with these types of issues. So we'll give him a call right back here. There's our ring. Hopefully it'll pick up.
You there?
Yeah, Glenn, can you see me now?
Yeah, it dropped off.
Yeah.
Or we go through the Van Allen radiation belt and travel past it. Anybody who tells you that you are sequestered or you are prevented from leaving the Earth's influence by the Van Allen radiation belt doesn't know what they're talking about. They have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that we have sent out our probes into space, Voyager and so Mariner and so many others. Obviously, they've gone past the radiation belt as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another um, issue to cause debate and confusion within the UFO field.
Mm-hmm.
It has absolutely, if you look at it from the planetary standpoint, from the charged particles, right now sitting in your studio and me sitting here, we're surrounded by charged particles right now. And it's not preventing me from going anywhere.
No, I'm charged up. Hey, so you mentioned overpopulation of the planet and the direction it's heading. But the data shows, Glenn, that the United States has had the lowest birth rate since the 1930s going on. And then there's some Western European countries that are not replacing their population. They are decreasing as well.
Middle income, middle class societies and countries have limited their population growth to about 2 children per couple.
Is that okay with you?
This is how they maintain a standard of living that's the middle class. You got 1.3 billion people in China, 1.2 billion in India, 1.3 billion in Indonesia,
Okay.
and it goes on and on.
All right.
When you look at the ratio of the United States to the rest of the world, it's very little in comparison.
So, I mean, even China predicts by 2027 a 0.3 population decrease. So I'm just saying, naturally, now of course, the U.S. population, if we look at the United States, we've got the whole southern hemisphere, the whole southern continent that doesn't do anything but produce kids. And those kids are coming up across the border. So our population, and I suppose when they get here, they ain't gonna have nothing to do. So they're going to produce kids. I'm gonna say, shouldn't we get that message out to them that we don't want to take every child that you spawn because that's your activity, it's all you can do, and then send them up here? I mean, shouldn't that be a good place to start to stop that population boom?
Politically, we have assured these people that if they come here, they will get everything they need for free. And they do pretty much. The cost of birthing a child is about $20,000. They don't have to pay. The cost to educate the child over 20 years or 18 years costs what, $100 and some thousand of the taxpayer money. It's not an issue of being non-compassionate. It's the issue of being responsible. And somebody has to pay for it. And I cannot ask somebody else to pay my bills any more than I can tell the people who want student loan relief that they can go into the finest restaurant and eat the finest steak and then decide let somebody else pay the bill.
I don't know.
That's not how that works.
Well, I'd like to go down south and then sneak across the border. Then I get some first class free airfare and I won't even have to take a COVID test. All right, let's get to another question here. It says, wasn't there an incident that the astronauts saw an alien spaceship? Now, I think several astronauts, didn't they say they saw, they seen a UFO?
Absolutely, yes. There's a book called Our Ancestors Came from Outer Space by a gentleman by the name of Maurice Chatelain. And he used to be the patent holder for all the Apollo telecommunication system. He was the guy who invented it. And he lists chronologically every single space flight since Mercury has been accompanied by UFOs, and the astronauts have seen them and filmed them. And many of the astronauts have come out. We know Scott Carpenter talked about it, Gordon Cooper, huge talk about it. Edgar Mitchell, even a little bit some of the Apollo 11 astronauts. So not all of them jump right up and say, hello, hello, hello. But I've got articles that go back to the 60s where the Gemini astronauts, who were the precursors to Apollo, described what they saw and photographed and how NASA would sequester it and cover it up. And so I think to a great extent the what's the word I'm looking for? The dissatisfaction that astronaut Armstrong felt after his Apollo missions was due to the fact of what they had seen and the fact that what's being hidden and will never be told. There is no such thing as disclosure. Does not exist.
Yeah,
whatever they tell you is what they want you to buy off on, but they're not telling you the truth on disclosure.
Well, I don't think they're telling the truth on anything, Glenn. We had Edgar Mitchell on here before he died, and he said that they saw all kinds of stuff up there. And I said, Edgar, I said, man, why didn't you say something back there? He said, because when you're in the program back then, they would wax you. And I said, what, you mean like Joe Biden's legs when he's at the pool, or what kind of waxing we talking about? And he said, that's an old term for. So he said, so they didn't want to say anything then, but he, as you know, he came out later. All right. Rose says, Glenn, I've seen aliens, but I never saw them come out of UFOs. Is it possible that the aliens are from another dimension or coming through a portal?
No, there's no other dimension. You have the what we call the third and the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is the dimension of thought, and the third dimension is what we live around us every day. There are not multiple dimensions. This is science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the UFO and the space perception has been polluted by science fiction. The moment something comes out in science fiction, right away somebody starts running around claiming, "Oh well, I got beamed up to that, Scotty, and I came through this portal, and let's see what else." Then there was Stargate, and every time a new science fiction concept comes up, we have the copycatters, and they say, "Oh well, this is what I experienced," because it's in their mind. They see it on television and embeds themselves in
Mm-hmm.
their minds, and consequently becomes part of their imaginary reality.
Mm-hmm.
Space people are physical beings just like you and I. The only difference is their technology is about 4,000 years difference than ours.
Mm.
So that's why they don't need any reason to come down and to steal your chickens and chop up your cows and all this other nonsense.
Somebody's doing something with the cow gonads, but it kind of reminds me. You mentioned the dimensions. Remember Rod Serling when he introed the Twilight Zone? He goes, there is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man, a dimension as vast as space and timeless as infinity. It is a middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. It's a dimension of your imagination. We call this area the edge broadcast. And so I really appreciate him saying that. So we could have other dimensions coming through. I mean, whether or not people agree with that or not, it sure does answer a lot of questions as far as dimensionality. Azur says, Glenn, was the landing shot in a film studio? If so, who directed it? And I think that's maybe the moon landing, but you're a moon landing believer.
First of all, yeah, it all comes from the assumption that Stanley Kubrick was asked a question. Well, do you think we could have faked that? And he said, yeah, probably. And that's because he had worked with the movie 2001 and other science fiction projects, which have we were growing in our technology film wise during the late 60s and accelerating through the 70s until we got to the 80s, where the science fiction fakery is so good you can't tell it from the real thing. So no, they were not filmed in a studio. In fact, during the time of Apollo, not only were there several hundred professional telescopes, but also a cadre of amateur astronomers all around the world that followed Apollo from the Earth to the moon and back again.
If Armstrong was the first person to walk on the moon, right?
Yes. Well, he was the first person. He was the first person from the public side of it to walk on the moon.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Who filmed him? Who filmed him coming down the limb?
There were several things. There was Aldridge, which was inside with his camera.
No, these were outside shots, right?
But the outside shots was situated cameras on poles, right?
Who put the poles out there?
When he came down the ladder, that wasn't the first time they came down the ladder. They had set up equipment around the lunar lander in order for cameras and for other equipment around the
So he may not have been the first person to walk on the moon. Whoever put those cameras out there.
Well, it could very well have been him, and then it was the first person.
Wow.
He may have gone down earlier and put down that equipment so that that you can see that.
Yeah, when he won golfing, he was setting up cameras. Well, then when the limb took off to hit the mothership, who was filming that? Did they leave somebody behind?
No, because the same equipment with the cameras that filmed the activity around the LEM was the same equipment that filmed them as they came off the pedestal and went back up and went to the lunar module.
Okay. So
So
did that camera beam those images direct back to Earth right then, or did they
yeah,
come back and get the camera later?
no, no, you have to think. Remember that all of this was broadcast for the first time semi-live. These weren't just cameras you loaded up with film and had to go back and pick it up and drop it at your Kodak dealer.
Okay.
These were broadcast
Okay. So
image.
there was a broadcast camera still left on the moon.
Yeah.
The limb took off. So was that camera beaming live pictures to Earth until the batteries went dead, or did they come back and get it?
No, no, they
So
left it there.
that camera was sending live pictures, and they left it on the moon until I guess it kept running until it died, or how's that work?
Right, like all the other equipment that was left on the moon. It kept running. Look at all the equipment that we have on Mars. It runs until it runs out of
So
solar
it tilted
battery power.
it had a tilt mechanism to go up with the
Sure. A motion,
wow
and a motion sensor. So it's
wow
aimed at the craft, and as it starts to move, the camera pans up with it, but it can
sure
only pan so high because there's a
oh
limit to
yeah.
the
Ooh,
pedestal.
man, that is
It's not,
some awesome camera. And I just thought they just had transistors and stuff back there. These guys had high tech, man, probably coming from the aliens. All right, let's get another question for you, Glenn. Do you know a scientist named Yarborough? My buddy's dad worked with Werner von Braun.
the name sounds vaguely familiar. I, of course, have heard of Werner von
Yeah.
Braun
Okay. All right.
and many of his compatriots in Huntsville, Alabama at that time.
Okay. Let's get to this question here. It's a nice one. Raul says, Glenn, are towers and military bases on the moon right now?
That is the rumor. The rumor is that we have continued a space program beyond the public one that was shut down by Nixon, and because we had missions planned all the way to Apollo 20,
Mm-hmm.
and we had earlier things as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was that we had continued a space program within the realm of military jurisdiction that launched from an equatorial position that's out in the Indian Ocean.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so consequently, there are talks about constructions on the moon. There are talks about explosions. There are talks about laser lights.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the additional pieces of information was called Alternative 3, where we used forced labor in order to construct these bases. So that may be where some of the abduction stories have come from, the fact that we used our own forced labor. And once we took them there to build the facilities, obviously they weren't bringing them back.
Wow. Waldo says, Glenn, are astronauts mainly 33-degree Mason?
No, Masons have nothing to do with the astronaut corps. They're mainly military officers, and are subjected to the rules, regulations, and restrictions that those military officers have. In the recent times, when we have got finally to the space shuttle program, then we had teachers and engineers and other people who graduated into that astronaut corps. But as far as any secret societies and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that has nothing to do with that. All these things are nothing more than
Mm-hmm.
distractions. People hoping to find some kind of clandestine
Mm-hmm. Glenn,
chew on.
okay.
Yeah.
Glenn, I know you got pictures from NASA. Have you ever worked for NASA?
No. Mm-mm.
Are you a big NASA supporter?
Well, let's put it this way. I believe exactly as my father. NASA cooperated with him when he asked for exposure to the catalogs of microfiche. In 1967, my father and my mother were invited to NASA Goddard Space Flight Center to show the UFO films that we have unarchived.
Wow.
Films that were considered the best in civilian hands. 3 months later, they were also then invited by Colonel Freeman in the Pentagon, and then many years later, after we did the moon research, by Lord Clancarty in the British House of Lords.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand, one, that they don't get a lot of love from the public, because the public doesn't understand that for every dollar we spend in space, we get $4 in return. That's a hell of a lot of better value than I get out of the stock market in the 401k that I got.
Wow.
Secondly, when you look at the amount of lives saved by the technology of the space program, it is incalculable. We can now measure and see typhoons and hurricanes and tornadoes and tracks. I mean, we have technology that has come from the space program and satellites that have completely changed the nature of our existence. So I sympathize with them when they can't talk, because some of them can't talk. Some of them don't know. It's like the fallacy that every military officer that walks in and out of the Pentagon has access to all the secret files, which is nonsense too. So they don't know. And I think we have to cut them a little slack, because, boy, we certainly don't show them much love. And then when they come out and talk, then we're the first one to tear them apart on top of it. So I understand their issues, their problems. And my father used to say, you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
Well, that's true, because I raise bees, so I've tried it. Are there aliens that walk among us?
Yes.
And how can we tell who they are?
You can't. That's the great part about it. They're not any different than you and I.
That don't sound great to me.
Why?
Because if I know which one's the alien, I'm going to say, what up, bro, space bro? Give me some high tech, or give me some space gold or something. I'm going to cash in on that thing. Take them around, show them like the Barnum and Bailey circus, get some money.
Yeah, that's why they're not doing it, because they're not here to be exploited. My father sat in front of one of the NASA scientists, and the scientist asked him, how many people, human beings that are from other worlds come amongst us? And my father wrote down a number, and he gave it to the scientist, who also had written down a number and gave it back, and their numbers were about the same. The idea is they come to visit us. They come to help us when we want it. And oftentimes we don't want any help, because we think we know every damn thing better. We love to create theories and opinions about stuff we have no idea about.
Right. It's fun, though.
But it doesn't do you any good, does it? I'd rather know something than guess, to tell you the truth.
Look, I've had some flat earthers on this program. They're pretty happy. So, inventing stuff can really work it could actually be good therapy, Glenn.
Well, if that's what they like, but I think reality is the source of advancement and progress.
Why would we want to cooperate with them anyway? They're trespassers on our planet. They need to get an invite.
Wait. How do you know they're trespassers on their planet? How do you know they weren't here a long time before you?
Because we are humans and they's aliens. Okay, so they from out there.
Well, that's a term. They're calling people who come from Mexico aliens too, and that does not mean it's true, does it?
Well, they are. Okay, all right. There's geographical ones and there's planetary trespassers. Okay, and I think look at Star Trek. Okay, they had the non-interference thing going on. Evidently, the aliens up there didn't get the message. They did not get the memo.
Oh well, they interfered twice. Otherwise, you'd have been dead with nuclear holocaust. So there's 2 times it sure as heck helped. And the next thing is that if it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't have had a space program, and we wouldn't have the advancements that we have. And for all the people who claim that they have of reverse engineered technology, we wouldn't have had that either. So where has been the downside? The only downside that I can see is us, not them.
Or somebody who's been abducted and probed. There's a downside right there.
I think there's a long way to go before that horse can be proved. There's a lot of accusations, but there's no proof. I recently did in a chapter in my book, and I did this research myself, and they're showing that nearly 150 million people in this country alone suffer from some kind of mental disorder, some fantasy fixation, sleep deprivation,
Mm.
and all these things, when you add them together, come up to the same conclusions and descriptions of what so-called alien abductors are experiencing.
So I wonder if
So
that's the same poll I saw where it said liberals, 63% of liberals have some sort of mental problem. So I don't know if that's the same study or not. It
there you
could be.
go. Well,
It
you'll
might be
have
the
to
same
ask
study.
them.
So I mean, I agree with you on that. There are a lot of people got problems, but I don't know. All right, let's get to this question here. It says, do we have any idea what the Chinese are doing on the dark side of the moon?
No, because first of all, we can't see it. And secondly, I doubt very seriously that we have hacked into the Chinese database. If anything, they hacked into us, not the other way around. And so I think there's a multitude of reasons to go to the backside of the moon. You're talking about helium-3. You're talking about a whole deal of other minerals and substances that can be advantageous to the building of spacecraft because
Mm-hmm.
it's done in a lesser gravitational
Yeah.
field, and it's also materials that are available. And I think they're in the learning phase, just like we should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking of learning, it seems like I remember somebody asked AOC or AOC told somebody said, she has great visions of doing stuff, and one thing she wanted humans to land on the sun, and somebody said, well, it'd be pretty hot there, and she said, well, we just land at night. So I don't know if that'll work or not. But
I heard that joke as well. But remember, the
that's a good
sun
one.
doesn't give off heat; the sun gives off radiation.
Aha.
There's a big difference.
Yeah, gotcha. And who knows what's in those coronal ejections? That sounds kind of kinky. Do you believe that there is a secret Navy space program?
There's a multi-services secret space program. Each one is doing their own thing. We had the same problem when this whole thing began, when the CIA took over from the Air Force, UFO reports, which by the time NICAP had concluded its investigation by 61, there were over 11,000 recorded sightings.
Wow.
And so the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, they all have their division.
Wow. Some people say that they've been visited by the Nordics. We have a graphic up on the screen now. Is that true?
No, because it's a false classification. Someone, also in this dubious field, decided because they had some descriptions of some of these visitors of being fair-skinned and fair colored hair,
Mm-hmm.
that they are now going to be um, what's the word, debunked
Mm-hmm.
by those who want people to believe that the space visitors came from Nazi Germany,
Mm-hmm.
which is really about as far of a stretch of stupidity that you can come across.
Yeah.
And so consequently, they decided to take that description and call them Nordics.
Yeah.
They tried this against George Adamski too until he said, "Fools,
Well,
read my book in 1955," and we describe men and women of various color and skin texture and eye color.
well, I think my background picture shows who they really are. The first picture, I don't think that's who they are. I think this is more like who they are, Glenn. Let's get to another question. Happy or Health Hippie says, Glenn, what's the true story about Roswell? Were there little gray aliens?
Roswell actually did happen. And of course, the leakage that occurred by Ramey and the others caused a great deal of frantic counter stories in order to cover their butts. What happened is the craft had what was called explosive decompression. It had a mechanical malfunction in which, going through a thunderstorm, everyone was electrocuted.
Mm-hmm.
And the portholes blew out like you would have in an airliner, and you have explosive decompression where all the atmosphere gets sucked out. And so that causes buggering of the eyes and bloating of the features and things like that. And so
Explosive diarrhea does the same thing.
there were a number of bodies recovered. Nobody was alive. This another falsehood that they found one alive and he walked among the Native American Indians like Jesus teaching is all a bunch
Or a
of garbage.
skinwalker.
And so consequently, the body.
Hopefully Glenn will come back. We got the error here with the Skype again. Lock up. That's a data issue, I think, but we'll have to.
President Kennedy viewed.
Okay. Alrighty. Can you hear me, Glenn?
I hear you.
Okay. It looks like the feed there from Skype is lagging a bit. Hopefully, I won't have to call you back. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next question. Is it true that one of the Martian moons is artificial?
That is what Russian scientists deduced already in 1959, that Phobos was artificial and that was towed from the asteroid belt and hollowed out and as used as a base for them.
Mm-hmm. Wow. There's seems to be an uptick in UFO revelations in mainstream. I got a link on my iPad popped up. You know, they recommended news article come from CNBC. I think the last C is probably for crap, but it was about UFO disclosure of some sort that the military is getting ready maybe to reveal something. But they had very short videos, but they showed two videos. One of a UFO going right into the water without making a splash, and another one going straight into the ground. And it kind of reminded me of War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise when the aliens came down, the lightning bolts went straight in. But have you heard about this technology that they've seemed to have captured on video, that it can go through various things without any effect of a surrounding material?
The craft generates what's called pro-gravity field. Nothing is anti-gravity and anti-this and anti-that is all a misnomer, because nature produces more energy than you can possibly produce to bring it to a 0 point and then to bring it to a higher point above that. Nobody in their right mind is going to waste their time and technology trying to overpower the natural energy of nature itself. And they use this energy to travel on twice the speed of light, or 360,000 miles per second, which is the speed of magnetism. And so the energy field in some of these pictures that you see extend beyond the craft. These look like water reservoir reflections on the lunar surface there on that photo.
Okay.
But the energy field extends beyond the craft, and the faster they go, the energy field gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So to give you an example, if it's going at half speed and the craft is 5,000 feet long, then the energy field extends for 10, 15 miles. And this is so that the faster that you go, it repels the space debris and micro meteors and dust and all that other stuff that's in space, because if you hit something at that speed, it just goes through it like butter. So the propulsion system works twofold: free energy and unlimited, to most extent, protection around the craft. So consequently, they can go straight into the water, and that's not an issue. In fact, they've done so many times. My father's book, Why Are They Here?, has a chronology from the 18 and 1900s of the many of the ships around the world who have registered and recorded these crafts going underneath the water, underneath the vessel, into the sky, deep into the trenches and things like that. And so if you look at space, if you can travel through space, then consequently traveling through water is not any more arduous of a task. It's just as easy.
Why don't our alien space brothers give us a cure for Cooties 19?
Is everybody supposed to fix your problems for you?
Well, you said that.
I mean, do you go to your neighbor and say, hey, I need my lawn mowed, and maybe you can clean out my toilet for me, and this and that?
Well, you did say earlier that without them we wouldn't have all these advances. Seems like that's the advancement they don't want. to give us. They've given us all these other advancements, like you said, night vision and microprocessor and various things, quantum computing. I mean, but they want to stop at something that's helpful.
Well, I would say the other stuff is helpful, and I would say that they're smart enough to have watched us for a long time and to see that we are so damn lazy. We don't fix our own problems. We shuffle off our responsibilities to whomever we can unload it to, and we don't learn a thing until we deal with our problems ourselves. If
Hmm.
somebody comes and gives you everything, then you're not going to do anything to rectify the situation. You're just going to keep saying, "Give me, give me, give me, give me." I
Mm.
think we do enough of that already.
Oh, wow, man, sounds like a little resentment there of some sort. I don't know, man.
No, there's no resentment. I just think that we're not realistic. I mean, what's realistic about asking somebody else to fix your problems for you and because you don't want to deal with them yourself? The people on this planet have created these problems, and we have created these problems through our own apathy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now you want somebody else to come and say, "Well,
Well,
I've been
wouldn't
apathetic,
well,
but how about you take care of me anyway?"
okay.
And I say, "Take care of yourself."
So they would say, "Hey, yeah, we got the cure, but you're also stupid." Based on what you said, you're going to have to die. Large chunks of you are going to have to die off until you learn. I mean, what kind of space buddy system is that?
Well, here's the other question: who developed these problems, these plagues and vaccines? Who
Uh,
developed them?
China,
Well, there you go. So how come we don't hold them accountable for that?
because
And how come we
because they
don't
bought
work?
half of America up. Half of America is on the take from China.
Well, but that's not their problem, is it?
Well, seeing
If
people
you're
die,
corrupt,
well,
it,
that's like,
if you're
well, no, wait a minute. That's like telling a fireman, hey, the guy in the apartment there, he started the fire. That's his problem. That's kind of what you're saying.
no, the firemen volunteered in order to do that job to address fire. He did
Hmm.
not address and say, these people are these people, and those people are those people, and they got this problem, and they got this problem. The fireman is there for one sole purpose, is to take care of the fire. So
Hmm.
that analogy doesn't fit.
I think it does.
I don't think
If
so.
they
I
have
don't.
a cure, they wouldn't they would you if your child was going to be hurt by something, you wouldn't say, well, you're going to have to be hurt so you would learn. You would stop them beforehand. And as you said earlier, they stopped us from nuking ourselves by flyovers over nuclear facilities, and they decided that they're going to interfere with our nukes. So there, it seems to me like they're picking and choosing about what they're doing and helping humankind. But that's also an easy escape route to say that's why we don't have the cure, because we humans are this way and that way, rather than saying the aliens aren't here to help at all, which is not what you
You
want
don't
to.
let your child hurt themselves in order to
You
learn?
you would
When they
interfere.
get out and get the bicycle and they fall down and scrape their knee, and instead you prevented it because you didn't want them to learn? Of course not. You know that they have to learn somehow, and the only way we do it is through a process of experience.
It's not true. I put training wheels on my kids' bikes. I didn't let them
But
fall down.
so they never fall down, they've never had an accident, they've never hurt themselves, they've never scraped themselves. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is, when I had in my power to prevent something, I did it.
But you can't prevent everything.
No, you can't prevent everything. I didn't say that.
Mm-mm.
But what you're saying though is a little is almost, it's kind of like an out. They're not giving us this cure because we have to learn. So I don't know, but we'll point of disagreement. We'll just move on. Question: is Planet X real?
There are three more planets in the solar system. The celestial solar systems comprised normally of 12 celestial bodies and one sun for a figure of 13. And so there are what we call planets X, Y, and Z. That information was released in 1977, coinciding not only with the Russians, but with our astronomers as well. And so there's another thing that's 40 years old, and we still haven't told the public any truthful information about it. Why is it that we get information on a 40-year cycle that's regurgitated over and over again? and nobody questions it and say, hey, wait a minute, you told us that 40 years ago. You expect us now to because they bring it about by generation, and that way they keep a generational gap of misinformation going, and so consequently, there are not too many questions or asks, not of any validity.
Um, Doreen 8951 says, Glenn, will there be full disclosure in July?
No, that's
Will there
simple.
ever be?
You don't spend 70 years of creating misinformation, misdirection, and outright lies and fabrications, and then expect them to come clean on top of that. No, they can't. Most of them wouldn't know to come clean about what. Because, first of all, they don't have access to the files. The President of the United States does not have access to the file. Any presidential candidate will tell you that they'll give you the information is lying through their teeth because they don't have the clearance to access this information. So, no, there won't be disclosure then. If they give you a little information, it's what they want you to know. Look at this Navy thing, this Navy video. That was taken in 2004. Forgive me, but that's 17 years ago.
Well, you got that right.
What the hell has happened in the meantime?
What is up with that? That's what I'm thinking. Where was this video when they got it? They just holding stuff back. They're always holding stuff back. It's kind of like revealing that they had Hunter Biden's laptop for 2 years. Where the hell was that, man? I mean, they're always doing stuff like this, Glenn.
Well, that's true. And that's because they've learned that they can get away with it. That nobody is calling them on the carpet. Nobody's saying anything. Nobody, especially in this UFO community, I mean, the information that these people spread around, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Wow. Australian Ben says this question here, Glenn. During the recent supermoon, I used my telescope to zoom in, and I could undoubtedly see small flashing lights emitting from the moon's surface. Are these reflections off the glass towers on the moon?
No, what you're seeing is there are areas of the moon which are highly active. I used to have an 18.5-inch telescope. I've downsized it to a better quality optics, but if you look at the reports that are coming through NASA's own observatories too, and also the Vatican's for that matter, the areas like the Straits Wall, the Alpine Valley, the crater Aristarchus, Archimedes, there are certain what you would call more activity hotspots. We observed 3 craft in the bottom of Aristarchus, and they stretched nearly from crater rim to crater rim, and that thing is 30 miles in diameter.
Wow, that's a pretty large craft. Raul says, Glenn, is NASA the only space agency in the U.S.?
The only public one. You have Space Command, which was basically named something else before that. You had Strategic Air Command, you had SAC, you had now Space Command, and each one of the armed forces has, as I mentioned before, have their little fiefdom, their little kingdom upon which they collect information and what they share and don't share. The FBI does the same thing.
Why do you think Donald Trump created the Space Force?
Well, that'd be a good question to ask him. I think that his concerns were that with more nations.
Well, we tried to get him on. He was busy.
Yeah, I hate when that happens. But there are many nations that are having space capabilities now, just like there are many nations that have nuclear capabilities. And I think in his case, he's concerned that that no aggressive nation gets the upper hand when it comes to space, because literally, if you can dominate space, you can dominate the surface of the planet.
Yeah. Well, so far, Biden's been trying to get rid of everything that Trump did in it ever, good or bad. He doesn't care. It's just taking a big hatchet to everything. just because it had Trump's name on it. But so far, he hasn't hacked up the Space Force. Do you think he will? Or are you going to leave it there and maybe make it into a equity outreach system in
Uh,
space?
I think that his problems are so numerous as it is. I think he'll leave Space Command alone for several reasons, and one of them is that a military operation, a military configuration, is not one that they like to dismantle.
Mm-hmm.
And not publicly, at least. Even if they told you tomorrow that they're going to take it apart, they're still going to operate just as they did before. The only difference is you don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that their concerns with space is a legitimate one in some regards. But we have to be careful that we don't militarize space with the arrogance that we're always the good guys and everybody's the bad guys, and we don't do nasty things, because our history is littered with very, very nasty things that we have done as well. People who we have assassinated, countries we have overthrown. So, boy, we have no.
Certainly we don't have clean hands in a lot of those fronts. But on the other hand, the United States is the most generous country that ever existed in the planet's history, and has done more good for more people everywhere. So it's sort of a, I don't know, maybe yin and yang, or sort of a balance. But let's not forget about the good parts.
No, absolutely not. And we have done. The American people have been most generous, but of course our politics are most generous with our money. I always like to hear them to say, "Well, the government is spending. The government doesn't is spending stuff that isn't theirs to spend. The government doesn't produce an ounce of revenue. We're the ones who produce it." And we're the ones who produce the wealth. So when they're being, shall we say, free with money, it's not their money, it's our money.
Yeah, kind of reminds me. I'm going to tie two things together. It's a movie. I don't know, it's High Plains Drifter or something, that Clint Eastwood. He's sitting on the porch of a hotel, and he tells the hotel owner that everybody's got to get out. And then this minister comes running over and says, "Brother, you can't throw these people out in the night." And Clint Eastwood says, "These people, they're your brothers and sisters?" And the guy says, "Praise God, brother. Praise God. These are my brothers and sisters." And then he says, "Well, then you won't mind if they come and stay at your house." That's kind of like the Democrats when they're inviting all of South America up. They're really inviting them into our house, but they won't take them, because if they did, they'd be filled up in Pelosi's mansion, and that ain't happening. I don't think AOC's got a few of them living in her house either. Health Hippie says, "Glenn, how many alien races are out in space?"
4.
Name them.
They're races, not species.
Ooh.
And that's where the confusion comes. There is this huge accusation about species. I sat down with a nuclear scientist in the Southwest. We had a symposium a few years back, several of us, and we talked about this situation, and he was quite clear. He says, crayfish, reptiles, Sasquatches, they got nothing to do with UFOs and UFO visitations. They do not have the intelligence nor the biological construct to build spacecrafts that are thousands of years ahead of us. We have humans, we have humanoid, we have robotics, and we have android. And so when you hear all these other creature feature stories from good old Steven Spielberg's Star Wars, you're being led down the primrose path.
Wow. So, well, I just don't want to see a Death Star come floating into our planetary realm here, Glenn. So, but why would there be bases on the moon? Is it a staging point for the rest of them?
It's a perfect location, and Carl Sagan said this already decades before he passed away. He said the moon is the perfect observation point for two things, and we have recently talked about that ourselves. One, it's a very near yet semi-protected observation platform of what's going on this planet. Secondly, the backside of the moon provides a uninhibited telescopic viewing platform to look deeper into the cosmos. And if you look at recent news, they are talking that they want to put something similar to Hubble on the backside of the moon in order to increase our awareness of the universe. And so I think it makes perfect sense. And so far, it's worked for us, and I think it's worked for them. And the whole sad thing about this is the agenda to keep it from people or the public or the citizens of this planet so that they can benefit for it too. Because trust me, if something catastrophic would happen on this world, it would be all the rich, greedy, corrupt, lion cop politicians on their first way out the door to leave the rest of us behind. And I've always wondered about that. When you look at all the bunkers that are built outside of Washington, and for all the political leaders to have safety during a nuclear holocaust, we're saving the very people who caused it to begin with.
I don't want to save them. It goes back to what you said earlier. They kind of they should get what they deserve.
Yeah, well, I think nature takes care of that, or God at one point or another. But sometimes between you and me, it doesn't happen fast enough.
Wow. Well, there you go. Now we're getting down to the core of it, Glenn. Well, tell us what you really think. So with the aliens out there, I know. I'm assuming they're the ones building the bases. Have we been to the moon? Do we have moon bases?
Yes, we have moon bases.
Okay. Do they, our space buddies, do they have bases in the same area, or is it kind of divided up?
Well, the moon's not that big in comparison to the Earth, about 1/4 the size. So, that I think to some degree there is cooperation on a need-to basis, but it depends on what we're doing too. If we're building a military base in which we mount lasers and nuclear weapons and things like that, they're not going to assist us with that.
Oh, they're not going to like that?
Well, it's contrary to what they believe and what they practice.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike people on this planet, they practice what they believe and they just don't cause lip service.
Well, I know that we fired on these bastards before. The United States military has fired on them.
Sure.
And then I think back in 42 or something, LA had a big firefight with these alien bastards flying around there through our airspace. There's no way we're going to hit them, right, Glenn?
No, and they weren't firing at them for that reason. The escapade in Los Angeles in 42 was partly confusion by the military because they were worried about an invasion by Japanese forces after Pearl Harbor. And so when these crafts flew in formation, our military facilities crapped in their pants and started shooting at everything in sight. And then as the years progressed a little bit and more information became available to them, then we ceased doing this. But the one incident I remember is one of our destroyers fired into the bottom of the craft.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an example, this is a small model here that I have available. And in the bottom of it, in the middle part is an ocular lens, very much like in a camera, an old Agfa camera. And it opens up and allows them to sit inside and look through that magnifying lens at the ground and observe. And when the lens is closed and the propulsion field is totally working, the entire craft is surrounded and glowing. But when they nullify that field, they become vulnerable. And one of our destroyers fired a shot into the bottom of the craft, and it exploded and killed everybody. And the craft fell into the ocean. And shortly thereafter, another one came along, goes down in the water, and using a magnetic elevator, picks it up and flies back off to space. If that would have been us, we'd have blown up and killed everybody in sight.
Wow.
Well, and that's not their mentality. So we have, I'll take their friendship and their gratitude and their assistance any day of the week.
Wow. That ship there, I believe I saw a diagram out on the internet on that. Is that something that George Adamski photographed?
He photographed. This one has some slight alterations to it, so that somebody can't use it and as a model and try to fabricate pictures. And the quick litmus test is that the portholes are not in groups of three; they're in groups of four. And that's the easiest way right off the bat to tell whether somebody's using a model or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look in this particular picture at the very beginning here on the right-hand side, 1, 2, 3, and the lip of a fourth. And it's the angle that this telescopic picture was taken at. This was taken with a 6-inch telescope. And this is a series of pictures because, as you know, in the old days, when you took photographs, especially glass plate photographs, you would
Mm-hmm.
you would take numerous photographs of the same object
Mm-hmm.
because you had no idea what the f-stop was and how well the
Mm-hmm.
picture would come out. I have pictures of this same thing in which half the craft is in the frame or it's tilted in a slightly higher angle.
Mm-hmm.
So this is only one. And George, he took the best pictures he thought he had in order to publish to give people an
Mm-hmm.
idea of what was out there.
Well, here's another picture of it. It appears to have a ring on the top of it, like somebody could hold it in the air with a fishing wire. Why would it have a ring on top so it could be transported?
No, it's not. That's not a ring. It's the reflection of the sun. That's a solid globe in which the sun is reflecting off of.
Oh.
And giving you the idea that that's a ring, but that's no ring.
Now, you do have to address the question where people say that they've identified that as a operating lamp with GE light bulbs in it. Would you like to debunk those people?
Absolutely. These photographs have been analyzed with every decade's best technology. So in the beginning, when these pictures were taken, they were analyzed by biometric radiology,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows that the craft gives off a slight heat radioactive signature.
Mm-hmm.
Then they were used orthographic projections, which can coincide the dimensions and the height and the width of the craft of about 33 feet. Then you have Eastman Codex analysis, in which it shows the same scout maneuvering about 90 feet
Mm-hmm.
from the lens and withdrawing one of the 3-ball condensers up and down.
Well,
anybody who tells you that this is a Coleman Lanner or a chicken brooder hasn't. They have not the slightest idea what they're talking about.
Well, I didn't say chicken brooder.
Yeah, well, that's the other one of those.
Okay,
one called a water cooler, a chicken brooder, a lantern, a light.
Yeah,
Yet
operating table light.
Okay,
but let me say. So I don't. Can you see my telestrator here?
Yeah.
Okay. This hole right here seems like you can look right through it, like it's an air vent hole for hot lights.
I don't see how you can look through there. There's no slots.
I see a hole on the other side of it. I can see right through there.
Are you talking about this reflection here?
I'm talking about this number 3 hole here. I can see right through it. You can see the hole on the other side. Is that for air vents for the aliens don't suffocate? Or I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
No, what's happening is the craft is slightly translucent. So what has happened is a configuration of gold and diamonds and titanium and all this material is put together, and they're fused atomically. It's not heated and riveted like we do, because when you heat metal, it weakens the atomic structure and the fatigue factor. They simply merge the molecules together. All these crafts are slightly translucent. And so you can see through parts of them, depending upon the angle and the variant amount of what you call energy that it is producing.
Okay, so when you're looking at this, then it's just really people just making stuff up because they don't like the idea that somebody took a picture of a UFO.
Sure.
And these aren't light bulbs. What kind of tech is that?
First of all, it's not light at all. It's a different metal altogether.
Okay.
And so those, as you look at it, you can see the direction that the sun comes in order to illuminate it. And since the craft is slightly tilted, it is also then reflecting the light at an angle like
Oh,
so,
okay.
right? And
Sure.
so, and then the other part of that is a completely third type of metal to be set as well. And so you have multi stages. The craft is put together like a Swiss watch. The upper part of this fits into a flange that fits into another. The military, when they recovered one of these intact in Alamosa, said that they were able to take it apart in a 3-stage process where it lifts one piece out of the other like a Chinese
Okay.
doll.
Okay. And then let me just do a final point on this, and we'll move on. Got to get near the end of the broadcast here. Let me see if I can bring this up here. This right here appears to be stamped old-fashioned metal. It's not straight. You can see ridges in it. It looks like an old-fashioned kind of artwork that you used to see on lamps and different things like that. You can see it's not straight. Could they not make a straight line with the welds or whatever?
Well, first of all, you're taking a telescopic shot, so you're not getting,
But it looks like that's where it's
eight and a
welded.
half
It's like a
pixels.
decorative weld right there. I'm just saying.
And secondly, that whole area is a ring. It is a rotating ring along the top of the craft. If you go back to the last photo, there's 4 rings. There are 3 rings underneath here. There's one outside this white ridge. There's one inside this white ridge. And like a gyro, they spin in opposite directions. And if you know your gyroscopic science a little bit, if you spin a gyro faster, you can see the rings here and part of that, and the magnets. If you spin a gyro faster than the Earth rotates, it flies off into space. It helps nullify the gravitational field.
Well, these
And
seem.
so on the very top of that same area that you circled, you have this one as well. And that is also a ring, and that's rotating ring here and 3 rotating rings underneath it.
Now, Glenn, how do we know what's inside this?
Because people have gone on board. George went on board. George took Eisenhower on board. George took Kennedy on board. George said every time he went into space, he says there was another passenger or 2 recognizable figures in our government, and they were on board as well. And the FBI, Hoover, wanted to go after George because he thought that all this human wellness of being sounded too much like communism to him. So George said, fine, subpoena me, and I'll give you the dates and locations of every single person that were on these crafts along with me, and the FBI dropped the case. They didn't want to.
Did we have communications with these aliens?
Well, you're not picking up the phone and give them a jingle, but yeah, we have contact.
What would we be discussing with them? Why do we even need to talk to them?
Oh, I could only think of about a couple million things.
Well, we can't ask them. We can't ask them for cures for cancer because we're not getting that. But why else would we talk to them?
Well, how do you know they have the cure? So first of all, there's a lot of assumption going on. Secondly,
they're not that smart. What you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is,
So I was giving them credit for being smart, but you're saying maybe they ain't.
well,
I mean, if you're in a sector,
I can't tell you everything that they do every day, year in, year out, what they have and don't have. I don't think there's anybody can truthfully tell you that. There's a lot of people who'll tell you a bunch of hokum that they make up, but it isn't based in reality. And so I would think that you learn about free energy propulsion. Gee, how would that benefit us? It would change the entire structure of our economy and our planet.
But they won't give us that. They won't give us that either. What do they?
Oh yeah. Oh, they've given us that. We don't want to use it because we don't want to change the status quo on this planet. It's not their decision.
Mm.
It's our decision who has prevented
Mm.
that from happening.
Has any alien species ever claimed that they are what 75% of the planet call God?
No.
Okay. Is there a God, Glenn Steckling?
Yes, sir. There sure as heck is. How can you look into the cosmos or look out in your window to your backyard and not conceive the supreme intelligence that grows your tree? You don't know how that grows. Who grows your crops? How I mean, how everything functions on the ocean, how the atmosphere functions, how you go into space and look at the Milky Way and say trillions and trillions of planets and stars. If you can't find a God in that, boy,
Mm-hmm.
then who
Or
knows what to
that the
say.
moon is perfectly positioned to control our tides and our weather. I mean, it's just, and it protects us. It's like a goalie taking all the hits from these rogue asteroids and comets and meteorites. It's taking a beating for us, Glenn. And I don't think it's
Well,
by accident.
not only that, I mean, you have to understand natural forces. The moon, when it was captured when it got to the point where the gravitational forces were equal enough to hold it in a position.
Which was the perfect position, an absolute perfect position.
Well,
And it
yeah,
happens to have a
you
perfect lunar eclipse. It actually is perfect. So there's a lot of perfect things about why the moon is where it is and how it got here and what it does. It just seems like human life may not exist even if there wasn't a moon up there.
look how many moons there are in Saturn and Jupiter. Too many to count.
They ought to appreciate it with all them moons. Now, I imagine you got toxic tides going back and forth. Each moon pulling different things. I mean, it's a nightmare up there, Glenn.
Why would it be toxic and why would it be a nightmare?
Well, because they said it's like acid
Nature
rain. They said
operates
those
on a
clouds are
balance.
acid. They said the clouds are acid, so that could be toxic. I don't know.
If that's true, if the clouds are acid, how do you land a probe with a parachute? What kind of fabric do you use when it's supposed to be 800 degrees and 400-mile-an-hour winds? Tell me what kind of material that you're using.
Now, are we talking about Mars or
We're
Jupiter?
talking about Venus.
Okay.
But it's still the same still applies. The simple matter is we don't know diddly squat about these planets and what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole bunch of theories and opinions, but we don't know anything of what truly is going on in there.
Well, that's true. We have so much to learn, Glenn, and I'm glad for your dedication to your research and your knowledge and the books you've written. And of course, we have a link to your website. Final question came in from Billy Strasser. Says, Glenn, do you believe in an afterlife?
It's sort of it's off subject, but yes, absolutely. I believe that the concept of reincarnation was taught by all the wise sages in the past, not just Buddha, but Jesus as well. And in fact, one of the theological studies that I have here on my shelf is a book titled Why Jesus Taught Reincarnation and Not Resurrection. Resurrection is a construct of the church. It had nothing to do with the man taught. And so, absolutely, you have afterlife. There's no way that you could possibly learn all that you need to learn, all that God makes available for your advancement. It could not be done in a single lifetime.
Mm. Have you ever sought Jesus' help on your studies and your knowledge?
I I think personally that that the concept of that individual is with everybody everywhere. So I don't need to seek it out. It is there.
So, if you believe in reincarnation, Glenn, what would you like to come back? Do you feel like you're in your first life or your second? You got 100 more to go. You can come back as a frog. I mean, what?
Well, first of all, you can't come back as an animal.
Oh, okay.
The frequency, the human frequency is unique. It's like your thumbprint.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, let's make the math easy and say the human frequency is 100 megahertz. And a horse may be 50, and a dolphin may be 65, and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot reincarnate into an animal form, and the animal cannot reincarnate into your form because it would be totally against
Mm-hmm.
what God has given you.
Mm.
God has given you the intelligence, the thought process, and the ability
Mm.
to use that which none of these animals can do. All these animals are limited to the environment upon which they are created. We are the only creation that is able to transcend all those different environments and learn from them.
Mm.
So, um,
Well,
as far as coming back, I I just as soon come back somewhere else where people are a little bit nicer to each other.
well, there you go. Well, I happen to believe that the Bible is true, and in it says it's appointed unto man once to die. After that, the judgment. So, and I haven't met anybody coming back. So it sounds like that's true. So I'm going to count and believe that that's probably more the case than continual coming back and going around in a circle. So,
I
hey,
hope so, because I remember the quote, in my father's house there are many mansions, so I think that holds true.
well, there you go. Glenn Steckling, been a great time with you this evening. What do you think about this kind of interview? I know you've done a lot, but this has got to be a little different for you.
I've done them all my life for most of it, but I like the format. I haven't used Skype that much, so that is a new adventure for me, and it seems great for your listeners and for those interested in your show. And you do a great job interviewing, and I like it that it's not so heavily serious, and you take some fun with it. And so I look forward to doing it again
Okay.
sometime.
All right. Well, Glenn, thanks for sharing your time with us here on the show. We're going to put it up on YouTube, Rumble, TuneIn Radio channel, and then so people will be able to watch this show again. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
I appreciate having me. So you have a good one, Dan.
All right. You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.